Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary folk. Welcome to our ultimate and hopefully very brutal science of titled The Goldilocks Zone, Balancing Turgid, Infodumps, and Airy-Faery Handwaving. In one corner of the ring, we have Peter Watts,
Hey.
a marine biologist and totally, absolutely quite famous science fiction writer specializing in hard sci-fi. In the second corner, there's Joanna Piotrowska, a charming yet savage scientist pursuing her PhD in astrophysics at the University of Cambridge. Let the fight begin. First round. Ding!
I did not know this was supposed to be a fight.
Yeah, me too, right? Me neither. I thought we were going to have a
description.
They're trying to turn us against each other.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's what moderators and like tin pot dictators all over the world always try and do. They try and turn us against each other when they are the common enemy.
No. We are the friends. Don't listen to them, community. First round. Since we already know what are you doing professionally, I want to ask you, what is your personal relationship with science fiction, pure love, or something entirely different? Ladies first. Go.
Thank you very much. So, actually, I would call myself a big fan of science fiction. I grew up watching science fiction movies, and to be fair, I think my first interest in astronomy came from all these images I've seen in science fiction movies. So I would call myself a fan of science fiction, but also a very critical fan. So on many occasions, you would catch me, for example, I'm sorry to say, but cooking and either listening to something science fiction or watching something science fiction and rolling my eyes on all the scientific mishaps that are included. So I am a fan, but a very critical fan.
A love-hate relationship, you say?
Maybe a little bit.
Peter?
Yeah, pretty much raised on the stuff. Of course, I was raised by a religious figurehead in the Bible Belt, so I was already sort of versed in the whole fantasy element of the literature. But yeah, I mean, I was sort of writing execrable little science fiction stories about mutants and octopus-human hybrids when I was like 9 or 10 years old. I obviously wasn't especially rigorous back then. And I wouldn't say that my my love of science fiction translated into my career as a scientist. Those two things were kind of differentially inspired in parallel by completely different elements. But certainly as they matured, each track cross-fertilized and influenced the other, for sure.
Okay, so we have calm stuff done. Now something more juicy. Do you think science needs fiction to be interesting? Isn't it cool enough on its own? Peter?
Sorry, the question is, isn't science cool enough on its own?
Yeah, do you think science needs fiction to be interesting, to be, to get broad audience?
Oh, Christ, no. What could be more downright fascinating than a look at the biochemistry of the left lacrimal gland of herring gulls? I mean, that alone, I mean, I'm amazed Spielberg hasn't picked up the rights for something like that. Science is a practice. I mean, I cannot speak to astrophysics because from my perspective, astrophysics is really fucking cool. But that's because it's way over my head. I mean, I used to be a marine biologist, and so I would spend like a week at a time sitting on a seagull-infested scabby rock counting harbor seals and radio tagging them through a night scope. And it's cool to be outside, but 7 days of that in a row can get pretty wearing. I think what science needs is a kind of an interface that allows people to see where science could go. And I think that that's something that science fiction is certainly not what science fiction is generally used for in pop culture, but it's certainly something that science fiction could use.
Joanna?
That's actually a very interesting point. So coming back to the first bit, whether science isn't cool enough by itself. Well, first of all, let me say something about astrophysics that might sound controversial, but hey, we're in a battle. So I get that a lot with popular scientists, people who popularize science, especially astrophysics, say the biggest names. Neil deGrasse Tyson or Brian Cox. They, in their speeches, when they talk about astrophysics, the real astrophysical phenomena, they use a lot of words that are strongly emotionally loaded. They would use things like grand, enormous, monstrosity. And I am guilty of that too, because in my talk about black holes, I was using these words too. But see, the thing is that these phenomena are already so mind-blowing. We don't need to add this additional top of coating to make it cool. So that's my first remark. Another thing is there is a difference between science itself being cool and the scientific method being cool.
Yeah.
So exactly, that's probably joining the voice of Peter here, that the science itself is absolutely fascinating. I can't remember what you've said about the seagulls or the exact piece of their organs.
It was not scientifically fascinating, believe me. It was trivial and boring.
But for the sake of the argument, let's just say that this fact is actually scientifically cool. I believe that the scientific method behind it and the life of a scientist can be much less cool. And that's where fiction might probably be a little bit useful when portraying people in the lab coats as living less of a boring life that they actually do. I mean, I work on black holes, but I stare at a computer screen at a code all day. And how does it make me different from a computer scientist, right? It's the science that makes, I think, a difference in. Well, as far as I can tell,
judging by mass market popularization, a computer scientist is somebody who invents a massive AI called Ultron overnight, while his superhero friends sort of crash on the couch, and then nearly threatens the world with annihilation.
So you kind of say that scientists in science fiction are too cool, like stupidly cool.
Yeah, I mean, would you even call them scientists? I mean, probably the best portrayal of scientists I have seen, realistic scientists that I've seen, you'd have to go all the way back to, what was it, 71? The adaptation, the original adaptation of the Andromeda Strain by Michael Crichton. You have a bunch of dumpy middle-aged people. I mean, obviously only one of us in this current battle fits that particular description. You're more of the female Tony Stark type, obviously, but you had a bunch of sort of rumpled people with personal foibles and didn't really get along with each other. One of them had epilepsy and had to hide the fact that she had epilepsy because it would have impacted her career. This was a movie that I found compelling, but basically did consist of showing a lot of people punching buttons. Since then, yeah, Marvel and Disney have people don't want to see real scientists. And, let me just go on a bit. I don't think that's really the point. The point of science fiction is not to show scientists at work necessarily. I think the point of science fiction is to explore the impact of scientific technological change and to show cool stuff in a way that hopefully doesn't insult the intelligence of the audience. I mean, that's where the wonder is, not in sort of ripping off the lab coat and counting the number of chest hairs that your particular scientists have or what they're, I mean, I'm sorry, I've gone on too long, yeah, but seriously.
I agree with you. I agree with you entirely, Peter. But coming back to the original question that was asked, I think science in general does not need fiction to be cool. However, the addition of fiction is a wonderful channel for a broader audience to connect with the science.
I would also ask if either of us is actually an adequate judge of whether science is cool. We have both gone into science, as professions. So obviously, I mean, it's like
incredibly biased.
It's like asking a German BDSM person if feces fetishes are popular or cool.
That's a great example. Just heartwarming.
Their opinion may have a certain validity within their culture, but I don't know if either of us can speak to sort of the wider audience that presumably science fiction is trying to get a hold of. I mean, I found my stuff with harbor seals. One of the talks I gave when I was getting started was reincarnating max headroom in the body of a harbor seal, because I was doing simulation models of harbor seals in a computer, and I thought that was, you know, deeply cool. But you have to constantly tart things up with those kinds of analogies and metaphors to make them interesting to a wider audience. Whereas I suspect that we, as you know, you as an actual scientist and me as a former scientist, just got off on the research. We didn't need the sugar frosting.
Oh, that is of course true. But then we got into the research, and we've seen all the nasty things about the research, and we still persisted, and we still think it's cool. I think it's more of a question of exposure. Not everybody will have a chance to lay their hands on actual science and research in biology or astrophysics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a matter of us living in different caves and not seeing beyond them just because life is too short. So I think science, okay, I cannot say science is objectively cool, but from my highly subjective point of view, I can imagine a world in which science is objectively cool.
Yeah, but you still need to disagree more. That's not a fight.
we could actually unite against you.
Oh no!
Yeah, we could just start dumping on your naive, misleading, and confrontational questions.
No, don't do that. I didn't thought about that option.
Actually, I just wanted to highlight. Chat from a chat message from NSV who says, "Is the conclusion that we need cool pop culture biologists?" I think you can address that one, Peter, from what we've been hearing so far.
Do we need a cool... hold on. Where are you finding that? I've just popped open my chat right now, and I'm reading, I have two friendly foster dogs at my feet.
Oh, that's me. Yeah, so just in case a dog pops onto my lap, I do apologize. They're very friendly.
That should not be a problem. You could have a chonk wandering across the camera here at any moment too, so... Falling into a rising ape, blah, 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 blah. Where the hell is this question that you're talking about?
You have to roll down.
Oh, is the conclusion that we need cool pop culture biologists? We've got cool pop culture biologists. I mean, you're thinking of them almost as little sock puppets to try and sort of sneak into the herd and infiltrate. We need whatever we can to... We need whatever works to, at least on this side of the Atlantic, to inoculate people against anti-science.
Oh wow, whoa. We're getting into a discussion that both of you and I feel will be heated about and in the same direction. And since it's a battle, I vote for the next question.
Yeah, I voted for next question
Fair
too.
enough.
Maybe this one will be a little bit more controversial. Can science fiction hurt science? If so, then how? What do you think? Joanna?
Ooh, I've got strong opinions on that.
Yes, you go.
Woohoo! So, most importantly, I think fiction can hurt science, undoubtedly. It's the way the science is depicted in science fiction movies, especially in the good ones, when you've got thick enough coating of science on the fiction that the boundary is just blurred, that people take in the information as being scientific facts and then just regurgitate it, even subconsciously, to their fellow conversation partners. And that is absolutely, to me, that is absolutely ridiculous. Like, I can't, the title doesn't spring to my mind, but all those movies that talk about time travel and they use these big words that are somewhat scientific, they pull words from all areas: cosmology, quantum chromodynamics, I don't know, observational astrophysics. They bunch them together, and then someone comes up to me and says, "Ooh, have you seen that movie blah and blah? I've seen you could do time travel with this vortex blah blah." And I'm like, no, that's not how the universe works. I understand this is a very good piece of science fiction, but this can hurt science. It's not harmful to you per se, but this can hurt science, because the more people believe that we can travel through wormholes, they will start asking questions. Why are we spending our tax money on sending James Webb Space Telescope up to space for $14 billion instead of building a wormhole traveling spaceship, right?
I am going to fight you on that one.
Yes.
I think
Sorry.
I think your position is predicated on the assumption that we matter, that science fiction actually matters. I think, and you can point to the fact that Reagan got a bunch of science fiction, right-wing science fiction writers to come up with a Star Wars initiative, or that when Reagan saw The Day After, he decided maybe this whole nuclear war thing wasn't all it was cracked up to be. But in all these cases, what you're basically getting is people cherry picking from a vast field to find justification for beliefs that they already hold dear. It's and you run into this time and time again. In fact, there was this whole hope punk movement has just sort of drives me up the fucking wall. The idea that you've got, the Crow is something Crow, the president of the Arizona State University, goes up to Neil Stephenson and said, "You guys, you science fiction writers, you're the ones that are responsible for the failure of the space program, because you've stopped dreaming big and you're writing dystopias, and you're not daring to reach for the stars anymore. And as a result, our engineers aren't being sufficiently inspired." And he could just as easily have said, yeah, under several subsequent administrations, funding for pure science has been cut to the fucking bone, and that's why science isn't being as inspirational. But no, we're going to blame these guys who tell stories for a living. And Stevenson buys into it, and they start writing these hopeful science fiction stories. But I don't think it matters. Did Obama read 1984 and say, and Obama's a big science fiction fan, right? Did he read 1984 and say, whoa, maybe we better dial back on this whole domestic surveillance thing? Show me the person who read The Handmaid's Tale and said, wow, maybe we better do something about these religious fundamentalists. You'll get no end of people looking to Larry Niven and Robert Heinlein for saying, yes, we must protect the high frontier, we must put guns on the moon. But those people believe that shit anyway. Where is there an example of the literature of science fiction actually changing somebody's mind? I think it has the potential to. I would love that if it did, but I also think that for the most part, science fiction is regarded as entertainment. And nobody has ever come up to me and said, why are you spending time looking at seals? Because I saw a movie where seals spontaneously combusted when somebody put a quantum phaser on them. I mean, has this ever happened to you?
So
Can I counter that, actually? So
yeah.
So,
I don't think you can.
I think I can because we do regard science fiction as entertainment, and I agree with you. I say up to 70%, because there will be the 30% of readers who are younger and much more capable of being science fiction has much more capability of leaving an impression on them when they're young. And this is very similar. Okay, now this is going to sound super controversial. Chat, don't kill me. It might be a little bit similar to a form of religious indoctrination. You're reading a certain type of story, you're reading a certain type of books, you're young and impressionate, and then bam, suddenly you believe white holes exist. Sorry, I had way too many conversations with people on white holes.
White holes don't exist?
They exist mathematically, yes. They are a solution. They are the opposite solution of the Schwarzschild metric. So black hole in a stationary space-time stationary non-rotating spherically symmetric spacetime solution. That's the Schwarzschild black hole, and it has the opposite solution on the other end of the solution world, which is called a white hole, which would just get rid of all the material. So you've got the thing that grabs onto everything, and the opposite potential that gets rid of everything. But that's only a mathematical solution that is not physical. So by Occam's razor, it's just discarded. So it exists in mathematical reality, but not in physical reality. And yet, every time I give an outreach talk on black holes, somebody comes up to me and says, "What about white holes?" And I'm sure they've read it in some books.
I did not know white holes were so firmly embedded in the public conscience. That's kind of cool.
They really are. It is cool. I agree. But what is interesting is that it doesn't matter how old the audience is. I will have children asking about white holes, and I will have people nearing their 80s asking about white holes. So it seems to be a ubiquitous piece of knowledge that seems to have attracted people either through popular culture or maybe science fiction depictions that is somehow so ingrained in their brains that they do ask these questions every time a scientist gives a talk.
I have to ask you about this because you are an astrophysicist and it is kind of on topic. The movie Interstellar. Okay. You got here a movie that had Kip Thorne as a scientific advisor. As last count, there were like 2 or 3 peer-reviewed papers that came out of the making of that movie. And yet it's got icebergs floating around in the clouds.
You know what the papers came out of, right?
The special effects stuff, right?
Yeah, they came out of the visualization of Gargantua, the supermassive black holes. And as I actually had a chance to talk a little bit about it during my talk earlier on Friday, that they've done real general relativistic modeling of the light around black hole. And in fact, if you look at Gargantua from Interstellar and then look up what Event Horizon Telescope team did as simulations for their weak accretion disk around a supermassive black hole in the center of the Milky Way, you will see they're surprisingly, stunningly similar, because that's exactly what we're looking at. This is the same object. It's just that Hollywood added, bells and whistles on top. But
they didn't just add bells and whistles. They added Anne Hathaway talking about how love was a transcendent physical
no.
force.
I'm not talking about the plot. I'm talking about the black hole itself.
But once they got inside the black hole, it turned out Anne Hathaway was right, and love was a transcendent force. And what's his name? The Matthew McConaughey character got to be the one who sent the signals back in time. And I mean, everything plot-wise about that movie drove me up the wall.
Me too.
And so I'm asking here's a movie which perhaps more than any other in recent memory prides itself on scientific verisimilitude and being, if you will, a delivery platform for a science-friendly payload. And yet it doesn't seem to be capable of showing a scientist with more than a room temperature IQ. And I would just like to know what an expert's view on that movie as a whole, and in terms of science informing science fiction, it seemed like a perfect case point. I just want to know what you think of it.
So first of all, I want to make sure that you meant room temperature in Celsius rather than Kelvin, because otherwise it would be pretty high for an IQ. But sorry, just thinking Kelvin is my sort of realm. But I didn't personally. As a viewer, I didn't like the movie. As a scientist, I didn't like the movie. But I have to give it credit for several things. I didn't like it because of the plot. As you've said, Matthew McConaughey and these boxes. I can't get over these boxes in the world, which is supposed to, I think, represent, I don't know how many dimensions we have in the black hole singularity. No, just forget that. Also, the black hole was rotating because we could see the signature on the light signature on the disk. So the singularity wouldn't be a point, right? It would be a ring. According to, if you read, for example, Penrose's papers, the singularity would not be a physical point in space, but rather a ring. But it doesn't matter. The point being, the plot was awful. Matthew McConaughey is really nice. I enjoyed watching him.
So is Anne Hathaway, yeah.
So is Anne Hathaway. There you go. But I have to give a couple of things. So first of all, they talked about time dilation. As much as they did a bad job talking about time dilation because the math doesn't add up, they did talk about it still. And I think it's important because it seeds this curiosity and some sort of key information in the audience's brain, saying, look, deep potential wells caused by deep potential wells of curvature in space-time caused by mass lead to a different perception of time for the outside observer and the person who's experiencing the potential. So that's an important thing. Another thing, they've done a pretty damned good job on this representation of a black hole. So at least I have to give them credit for these two things. Or the rest, I'm sorry, I just can't. But to summarize, didn't like the movie. 2 brownie points for these two things. And I didn't find it astrophysically offensive. I just found it very well made for the amount of money, an enormous amount of money they had. Very Hollywoody and sort of disappointing, but not offensive. Also, can I just say that someone tells us, someone at the Nick of Kitco tells us not to not let the physical reality diminish the mathematical truth, and I agree. About with that. I actually. Okay, before turning full-blown astrophysicist, I actually come from numerical methods kind of background, so I am as much a fan of the mathematical truth as the physical truth. But for the purpose of our discussion, let's put the white holes behind.
But why not? I mean, wouldn't a perfect role for science fiction be to take a mathematical, not physical truth and explore its ramifications as though it was a physical truth? Isn't the whole point of science fiction to say, what if this were the case?
Well, I disagree, because science asks these questions already. Like we ask those questions. We ask, what would a white hole signature look like? And the answer is, well, it probably wouldn't look like anything because they don't exist. Or let me put it the other way around. If I want to be very controversial now, maybe the Big Bang is some sort of a white hole. It's, again, don't quote me on that. I want it to be controversial here. But
okay.
I don't want to get into this because it probably would be too obscure and opaque. But just to ask you, now that I have your attention, are you familiar with Lee Smolin's stuff?
Of course. I actually talked to Lee Smolin personally. He's a wonderful guy, by the way.
Yeah, I've met him once or twice. But is he batshit, or is there actual hope here?
No. I don't think I exactly the opposite. I don't think he's batshit at all. I had a chance to talk with him and his students a lot about loop quantum gravity as a concept, and both as the progress in the research. I think the idea is sound. It's just that we don't have the idea is complex, but it's sound, and we don't have enough manpower due to, unfortunately, the academic structure of alternative or unifying theories. We don't have the manpower to pull it off, because right now string theory.
Can you sum up the idea?
Oh, well, that's a very good point. So
yeah, because it's not so obvious for everybody, right? Sorry.
Yeah.
I was thinking the black hole baby universe's reality of time thing, where the actual physical laws of the universe evolve. I don't know if that's what you were talking about. I've only read his pop science stuff, right? Because
okay.
I don't have anywhere near the background to be able to understand his math.
Don't get me wrong. It's not like I understand all of his math either. No. But when explained hand-wavy enough, well, even hand-wavy, it's not really clear, to be fair. So, how can I put that? You know what? Let's defer that to a later time, because okay. I will probably make a mess, and nobody will. I won't understand what I'm trying to say, and nobody will understand what I'm trying to say. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Loop quantum gravity in 5 minutes. These talks don't exist.
So let me cut in. First thing, I must say I love the phrase astrophysically offensive. And second off, Peter, I am under impression that you're telling that science cannot benefit from science fiction, and I feel like Joanna is telling something quite opposite. Fight.
I actually, I don't think that's the case. I think we may not be exploring some of the ways in which science and fiction can help each other. We've sort of looked more along the lines of the big budget cinematic anomalies. One of the, just to stick with the written form for a bit, one of the things that I've always wondered about, and that I sort of almost consider it a belief at this point, is that science fiction is almost too important to be left to the scientists, in the sense that for a very long time, and I don't know if it's still the case now, we were taught to never speculate. We were taught to be very poor writers. Like it's only within the past 10, 20 years that we've been allowed to use personal pronouns in formal papers. If anybody had anything approaching literary style or engaging prose, it was hammered out of them at the undergrad or at the latest, the master's level. There have been a few studies in which it's been shown that the more opaque and badly written a paper is, the more prestigious will be the journal in which it finally appears. There was one person who wrote 6 different drafts of the same paper. And the first draft they found was turgid and self-contradictory and opaque and used all sorts of big words. So he whittled it down until the 6th draft. The 6th draft went the rounds and was rejected. And so just as a joke, he submitted the first draft. And the first draft was accepted in a prestigious journal with minor revisions. And this led to something called the Dr. Fox hypothesis, which is that basically the more obscure and arcane, the less comprehensible your writing is, the more highly it will be regarded by experts in your field. The point being, if somebody writes clearly and concisely and properly, the reviewer will read it and say, well, yeah, of course, that's obvious. But if they can't understand what the hell the second sentence even means, they're going to be more like kind of an emperor's new clothes scenario, right? They're going to look at it and they say, well, this stuff is way beyond me. It must be good. And so for a variety of reasons, I think scientists in general make unimaginative and generally second-rate science fiction writers, except when they stray outside the bounds of their own expertise. I think expertise might act as a straitjacket. I mean, the whole point of science fiction is to say, what if things were different? And the whole point of being a scientist is to be invested in the way things are. And so you have someone like Werner Vinge, a computer scientist, who comes up with this amazingly cool and imaginative zones of thought idea in which the speed of light actually changes with distance from the galaxy. It's probably just hand-waving bullshit, but I found it was fun, right? It was interesting. And it was imaginative. And then he tries to show what like the 32nd century internet, galactic internet is going to be. And it's basically Usenet from the 1990s with all with the serial numbers filed off. My own stuff, I started off writing stuff about deep sea because my background is in marine biology. A lot of people really liked my marine biology stuff. But as far as I know, nobody ever, the reviewers would say, oh, yes, you can tell he's a marine biologist. It reeks with verisimilitude, blah, blah, blah. But as far as I know, I never really inspired anybody's research that way. Then I got out of the deep sea and started writing about basically natural selection in digital ecosystems. I know jack shit about computer science, really. I used to know a few languages. But in terms of coding and programming, that sort of stuff, all I did was take basic Darwinian expertise in one field and poured it into another field over which I knew nothing. And all of a sudden, people are writing theses on this stuff. There's a guy from Lawrence Livermore Labs who says that he has been inspired by my research, but he can't tell me what the research is because I don't have the security clearance. And so here is my
true in Los Alamos here.
here is my theory, which is mine, and that is, you're raised in science, you develop a respect for the scientific method. and for rigorous thinking and for systematic empiricism. And that is a skill set that ports no matter what the actual facts of your field are. You take that attitude and you move it into an area where you don't have very much knowledge. You can let your imagination off the leash in a way you can't do it when, I think it was Michael Swanwick who pointed out that Isaac Asimov wrote very little science fiction about biochemistry because he was a biochemist by profession. And the moment you try to introduce an innovation, you know all the reasons why that would never work. You know you could never, Adrian, you could never write a Zones of Thought story because you know how much bullshit the idea of the speed of light changing with distance from the galactic core actually is. And, you know, poor you didn't get to write A Deepness in the Sky. And so I don't know. Tell me what you guys think of that. The idea that you take the respect for the process, but you move into an area where you don't have as much constraining expertise, and that you may write a better science fiction novel. Emphasis on the fiction, of course.
Oh yeah, but that's so you're answering the reverse question, right? Because we asked whether fiction can help science, and what you're arguing, which is, by the way, a very interesting point you've just made. I haven't thought of that. That science and being embedded in science can be detrimental to good fiction. Yeah. So you've reversed, you flipped the question upside down, but it's absolutely fascinating. And here I will agree with you entirely. That because we know our limits, if you will, or because in order to understand how the world works, we have to understand how it won't work. So by discrediting all the other hypotheses, we just live in this realm of physical world that we observe, and we're fine with that. And then writing about say black holes that explode would be hard, because we know what black holes are, so we know they can't explode, if that makes sense. It was a silly example, but here it is. Also, I'm sorry, I keep on referring to the chat, but I saw an interesting point from Septi, who said, what you're saying, Dr. Fox's hypothesis, is actually scary. And I would like to give chat credit for that this hypothesis is indeed scary. And I don't know how much you've had of your own experience of seeing that in your own work back as a hardcore scientist, but I've experienced that when reviewing papers, other people's work, that they wanted to, in many occasions, the paper would assume they can get away with unclear method or unclear explanations by sounding above my head. But then if you have a reviewer who doesn't have time and thinks, oh, okay, that sounds smart enough or smarter than me, I'm going to let it pass. But if you're a grad student who is really meticulous and is taught to question everything they do, then you spend hours in reviewing those papers and get reviews of even worse versions reviewed back at you, and in the end you sometimes have to reject the paper just because this hypothesis is to a large extent true. It also depends on who you fall for, who you meet on your way during the review process. But it's I would agree that to a large extent it is a phenomenon that occurs, and it is indeed really scary.
Okay, so I will be mean because you both said that science is cool enough on its own. But then you are saying this whole bunch of stuff that is proving that if science isn't worthy enough, cool enough, it won't sell. So how do you prove I'm wrong?
It doesn't matter whether it's cool. All it matters is whether it makes money for the right people.
Oh, whoa.
Come on.
Here I am, a young PhD student. I am still driven by an idea, okay? I'm an idealist. I am not yet broken by academia. Well, I can already feel the teeth chipping on my heart, but I'm still not broken yet. And I don't think...
That comes with age. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So I'm still unaffected, but science itself, I don't think it is what makes most money to people. That is cool and is present in popular science. I don't think this is the case. Not this is definitely not the case. It might be the case with, if you will, government sanctioned research or private sanctioned research, but not in the case of research when we're paid nothing and still work for the sake of working on science. I think that's where the cool factor comes in. Which
is much like actually writing science fiction as a mid-list author too. But I agree with you totally. I have three. I myself break science into three categories, and you are in the purest kind of science. Honestly, like you are. It's basically curiosity-driven, cool number crunching. Really, black holes don't threaten anybody's political agenda. Nobody's going to be out of a job, depending on what you come up with or what you publish. If you get into the big leagues, somebody may decide, no, we have to spend more money on the latest ICBM than we are on your stupid super collider or your giant, But for the most part, you guys, the pure scientists, the curiosity-driven ones, get to do what you want. The second category is I would basically consider the applied science, like how to make, the pharmaceutical stuff, how to make better no-stick frying pans, right? And that stuff is they don't really care about the ethics as long as it makes you money. I come out of a third category called horror science. And horror science is something where most people don't really care about it, but some people care about it really, really strongly. In my particular case, it's like the government wants to suck up to a bunch of people who have wiped out the entire fucking cod population of the North Atlantic and are blaming harp seals for it. So they want to have somebody prove that harp seals are a major result or a major cause of the collapse of the cod fishery. On the other hand, you've got the whale huggers who think that blue whales are capable of telepathy and dolphins know higher mathematics. And so you've got these special interest groups who will shower you with money as long as you come to the conclusion that they already have decided that they want you to come to. And that's kind of the scientific, like I sort of came up through that marine mammal horror science category, and I envy you. I would much rather have been able to have a Saturn V rocket on my thing as opposed to like a toasted seal flipper from Newfoundland. But here we are. The only real reason I can feel better about my life than yours is that I've lived most of my life now. So when civilization collapses, I will have lived a good life. You're obviously in your prime, and you'll probably end up breaking your teeth on the last tin of Spam that you're fighting over in the ruins like 10 years from now.
Oh, wow. Wow. That was grim. Well, actually, I'm hoping to do, I'm actually hoping to touch science a little bit closer because I'm applying to be an ESA astronaut because they've launched their, yeah.
Seriously?
Yeah. So I'm really excited about that. Well, obviously the chances of me meeting the criteria, well, I meet the criteria, but the chance of making it through are obviously skim, right? How many thousand people will apply? But still, that's a thing that hopefully will make me touch space a little bit closer than from my backyard. But
well, don't underestimate charisma. I mean, there is a lot of politics in this stuff too, right?
Oh yeah. But let's
just on basis of sheer charisma, you probably got a leg up on a lot of people there.
Well, let's hope I can make it at least through the first round. That would be super satisfactory. I like
charming, cute, savage. Yes,
I'm cute, savage. Not being cute, savage. No. But jokes aside, so I think we do strongly disagree. But that chance, part of this disagreement comes from the fields we originated in. Obviously, my experience is entirely different. In astrophysics, the money is not there because who cares about black holes colliding, right? I mean, obviously, LIGO, interferometry, the gravitational wave detectors, it's a lot of money put into the project, but the science itself is, if you will, politically harmless and astrophysically astrophysically non-offensive at all. in fact, it was there a wonderful proof of yet again the truth behind Einstein's theory of relativity. And the point being is that the field I'm coming from has always revolved around things that are sort of harmless to humans, and I feel that if you come from this perspective, science is cool enough. There is no money factor. There's not even a personality factor. I mean, I know Brian Cox and sorry for returning to Neil deGrasse Tyson all the time, but these are the first two names that pop into my head when I think astrophysics, popular science, right?
Brian Greene.
Oh yeah, of course. And that's actually my favorite. That's actually my favorite because I don't like. Sorry to all the audiences that love Neil deGrasse. No. His personality absolutely throws me off, and Brian Cox is kind of a showman. But there's the third person in this trio who's actually really worth reading. So I do recommend him. But that's that's beside the point. What I wanted to say is that you don't even need personality and charisma in order to show how this pure science, astrophysics or mathematics, or if we go down to smaller scales, quantum mechanics, is cool because it is cool by itself. We don't need fiction. What can be more exciting than the most powerful engines in the universe? Accretion around supermassive black holes, or just black holes in general, turning 30% of the mass into pure energy. That's you don't need to sugarcoat it. You don't need to flash additional words on top of that with a lot of charisma on a big stage. It is cool by itself if you read it in a black and white textbook.
Yeah, but we are, as organisms, we are wired to look at things in terms of narratives.
Ooh, that's a very fair point. Someone brought it up in the chat as well.
So putting that, did they?
Yeah, but that's way up. Don't worry.
I mean, it seems to me that, and it's granted. I mean, no contest at all that this stuff is empirically cool, right? But you're not talking to a population of empiricists. You are talking to a bunch of meat-eating apes, who, though we have big shiny brains, our basic drives and instincts are still 50,000 years old at the youngest. And we are programmed to internalize lessons, survival lessons, in terms of narratives. And so I would argue that no matter how cool something is empirically, it sticks more to the audience if it is embedded in a story.
Okay.
I so want to disagree, but that was a convincing argument.
Okay, so I have a question that maybe you will meet up in the middle with this one. Where does the Goldilocks zone lie exactly, in your opinion? Can you think of a good example? Like, where is it? What is the golden, spot on presentation of science that is also fun?
I can tell you one that isn't.
Okay, go.
And we can start from that, okay? I was researching, one of my books I was researching, it basically involved this little apocalyptic microbe. And I was consulting with an old university professor of mine up at Guelph. And one of the questions he asked was, yeah, but how does Behemoth get across the cytoplasmic membrane in a way that doesn't trigger the lysosomal enzymes? I was like, wow, that's a good question. I never would have thought of that. And then I thought of all the other people who think of me as like one step above a pedophile because I left a promising career in science to become a science fiction writer. And I think, oh, they would have thought of that. So I stick into the middle of my book this info dump about a 535 amino acid listeriolysin analog chain that fools the cell receptors on the cell wall and allows Behemoth to be incorporated without it inducing lysis. And basically, I stopped the plot dead for like a page, maybe, in order to cover my ass against a small fraction of people who probably wouldn't be caught dead reading my stuff anyway. On the other hand, I don't know if you guys are familiar with a story called The Screwfly Solution by James Tiptree. It's kind of an epistolary thing. It has some prose, but a lot of it consists of like letters and technical reports and news reports and so on. And it's basically about the rise of homicidal misogyny across the world. All of a sudden, this cult, this religious cult, starts killing women because angels are appearing to them and telling them that Eve was responsible for the original sin, and the second coming of Christ will not happen until all the women, all of Eve's descendants, have been exterminated. And so you've got this weird cultural thing happening. And some people are saying that this is just hysteria. Other people are saying, you know something? Whenever the jet stream touches down, you get an outbreak of this kind of religious mania. And after a while, societal norms start to change. The Vatican starts to say, well, actually, it doesn't really say anywhere in the Bible that women have souls. Various funeral homes say we regret that we can no longer accept female cadavers. The Japanese are hauled in front of the UN because the bodies of female corpses that have been wrapped up in drift nets and thrown overboard are posing a navigational hazard. And what it turns out to be is that something described at the very last line of the story as a real estate agent has decided it wants the real estate, but it doesn't want to drop an asteroid on us or nukes or anything that would wreck the property values. So what it does is it takes the neurological pathway that is responsible for both sex and for violence, and for evolutionary reasons, these two things are very closely linked neurologically, and it just edges the thermostat up so that instead of, so that we stop being sexually aggressive and just become purely aggressive. And it basically, the entire species is being pheromonally reconditioned so that the males stop having sex and just start killing things. And I find that one of the most perfect examples of biologically based plausible science fiction. At the same time, there was an obvious political element to it that just blew me away. And I actually knew people who were finding the same sorts of things in fish. Like there were certain types of sticklebacks that forgot to switch from fight off competing males to mate with females and would beat the crap out of female sticklebacks. Like this thing is an actual biological phenomenon, but it did not exist. Nobody knew about it when the story came out. The story came out in the 70s, I think. And I think that might be my perfect example of something that takes a beautiful, not beautiful, but elegant, I suppose, biological principle of pest control. The title, The Screwfly Solution, was taken from one of the characters in the story who was actually trying to treat a screwfly infestation in Latin America by pheromonally altering the bugs so that they would mate with the wrong end of their partner. And as a result, you would get the screwflies would just go extinct. And I found that it was a beautiful, the prose wasn't necessarily the best, but it was the most effective, chilling, profoundly plausible conveyance of a really interesting biological concept into a story. It was like, to me, perhaps the perfect balance of story, character, absolutely frightening political commentary. Did I mention biology?
Yeah.
And plot. I mean, that to me was the essential perfect balance package.
Yeah, and it's very interesting what you find beautiful. Sorry. Joanna?
Right. So it seems like my camera has cut out, but I'll be back in a moment. The point. So I wanted. Oh, here I am. Fantastic. Yeah. Great. So I wanted to say that I think I can think of two good examples of where Goldilocks zone starts, and this is a very shady area because the viewer, the audience, will not notice where the Goldilocks zone starts in these. So two movies I can think of, Gravity and The Martian. In case the audience has seen it, in Gravity, we see the space station being torn by space debris. And this is a very good point. We actually have a big problem with space debris right now. That is, well, the addition of all the new satellites that are being, that are being exploded in terms of.
So cute.
Yeah, she's really cute. Her name is Bezos. Kisses. You can see why. Yeah. So yeah, Bezos. Yeah. So it is a real problem, and it is possible for space debris to approach a space station and actually wreak havoc. But you would never be able to see it coming because of the velocity at which it's approaching you. So it's a very non-obvious thing and a connection that the audience won't make. So this is where science, real science, meets fiction in a very smooth coating, smooth transition, and the audience is entirely unaware. To me, when I watched it first, it actually didn't occur to me, and then I had to think, hey, hold on a second, how did they know that the debris was approaching? Well, obviously it is only through their detection, right? And then I went back to watch this part of the movie to see that they actually saw the debris moving, and that was mind-blowing to me. I know it's a detail, but in Martian, another thing, the Martian storms. The storms on Mars, they are a real thing. But people seem to have forgotten that the density of atmosphere in Mars is several times less than that on Earth. So this wind wouldn't be able to carry all this dust so efficiently, and it wouldn't be able to hurt all of those. Oh, hello! And it wouldn't be able to hurt all of those pieces of equipment. So again, it's a very plausible, a real thing that we do observe, and we've seen on Mars for the longest time, observing Mars through telescopes, that there are gigantic storms. But so this is a real scientific thing that people should take away from the movie, that Mars does suffer from dust storms, but they have the wrong understanding of the challenges posed by the dust storm, because it wouldn't be able to hurt any of the equipment.
Fun fact, Andy Weir apparently was completely aware of the fact that the wind wouldn't be strong enough to knock over the spaceship, but he left it in because he said he didn't want the accident to be anyone's fault. He wanted it to be people against nature. He didn't want, I mean, it's almost sort of a Heinlein competent man thing, right? So he deliberately fucked with the physics because he didn't want human error to be responsible for the basic premise of the book.
That's a fantastic input, by the way. Thank you very much. I was unaware of that, and yes, it fits. I mean, it obviously fits the whole idea behind the book. But it also stems. This actually stems from our real scientific knowledge of what happens on Earth, because we know what it is for humans to fight against nature here on Earth. We know what it is like to climb Mount Everest. We know what it is like to survive Katrina, right? So all of this is so close to. It's just so natural for people to think that we will struggle against these natural phenomena that we forget that on Mars they do not work like they do on Earth. And I think that's a very the decision to include this form of humans against nature and not human fault element in the book is actually a very clever decision, because it plays on our memories, on our emotions, and on the things that we consider natural.
Okay. Since we don't have much time, to be honest, we don't have time, but I still have one question I want to ask. So this one is for you, Peter, but Joanna, you can comment and you can be ruthless with it. Because the question for Peter is, let me find it. I'm lost because it was somewhere. Oh, yes. What is the most airy-fairy hand-waving thing you have written and are aware of? Maybe a little ashamed of too?
Me? Oh,
yes. Yes, it's an awful one.
There are maybe two examples. Only one of them ever got published. The first one was something I wrote in high school, and it was, I don't know if anybody is familiar with Ted Chiang's story, Exhalation, which is basically kind of almost a steampunk story about how cognitive processes might be pneumatic as opposed to electrochemical. But I had the same basic idea back in the 70s when I was in high school, and I wrote this short story from the point of view of a foam rubber pillow. I was like, people lying on pillows would provide motive force that would squeeze air from the little pockets, the bubbles of one pillow into another pocket, and these would form the equivalent of neural nets, so that the pillow itself would develop intelligence and ultimately consciousness as people lay on it. And pillows in like brothels would be especially traumatized because there'd be like 14 or 15 different people with different sleeping patterns lying on the same pillow every night. And the neural nets, the neural pathways would be all screwed up, and they would basically, this pillow suffered PTSD because in order to be a healthy sapient pillow, you have to have a consistent person lying on you with consistent patterns so that never got published. Maybe I should dig it up.
It sounds amazing. Really, I hear my husband choking with laughter in the other room.
The one that did get published that's closest to fantasy was a story called Nimbus that was inspired by my girlfriend at the time. Basically looked out at this advancing storm front and looked at the clouds, and she said, wow, those things almost look alive. And I thought, wow, live thunderclouds. So I basically wrote this story about clouds, like
Conscient.
Yeah, except and I sort of threw in a veneer of science, right? Like basically it was bioelectric microbes in the clouds, and you would see these two clouds bumping into each other, and the character would say, "What's going on there? Is that just a conjunction of water particles? Is that like a 50 megabyte or megabaud data dump between processing nodes? Like, how do these things work?" And the entire world, essentially, civilization had been laid waste because these things were angry. It was kind of Return of the Old Gods. And that to me was like a brain fart. It was total fantasy. And then like 5 years later, I read on CNN that a bunch of Israeli scientists have discovered bioelectric microbes in the clouds that they think might actually be affecting the world's weather. So it just goes to show that,
oh my God, was it peer reviewed?
It just goes to show that when you actually write about something that you know absolutely nothing about, sometimes you kind of hit the bullseye.
That's awesome. That's truly awesome.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah. That's what can I say? Now we're gonna change the angle into a shittier camera. So, hey.
How come your name is spelled Asia, but everyone calls you Jana?
Oh yeah, so Joanna is the full name, and Asia is short for Joanna in Polish.
That's not the topic.
I just didn't want to keep insulting her by using the wrong name all the time.
That's fine. My PhD supervisor, he still hasn't worked out that Asia is not Asia, so it's fine.
Yeah, I thought about it. Okay, Joanna, so maybe you will give us an example or very bad portrayal of science in fiction. Just, not your, but something you maybe like because it's so bad.
Yeah, I have one. This is my absolute favorite. So the movie is called, and I'm sure you all know it, Armageddon. Have you seen it? A gigantic asteroid coming at us. Oh my God, there are so many things wrong with this movie. And I mean, I could count it. I have a whole list. But the favorite thing that is so bad, but is so good, there are two things. First one is that this big bomb asteroid is coming to us undetected. This is my favorite. No thing. Oh, and my light died. You know what? I think my dogs have disconnected my power. That's what happened. Okay. Yeah, but I'm still alive here. Okay. So, first of all, the NASA monitoring system would never allow an asteroid this big. I think it was 10-kilometer radius or across. Never allow this to pass by our radars. Yeah, sure, we're missing all the small stuff, like maybe 2 meters across, and it can still inflict damage. Don't get me wrong. If you remember the Chelyabinsk meteor that left this gigantic streak of light in the sky and literally wreaked havoc in taiga, in tundra. Taiga. It doesn't matter. The point being, it was only a couple 100 meters across. And these things can already hurt us. But a 10-kilometer thing, we could totally find it. So that's the first thing. It's so bad that it's so good, that it's so believable. That NASA scientists so cocked up that, yeah, we missed that. So that's the first thing. And second thing, my absolute favorite, the idea of putting a nuclear bomb on top a spaceship that can blow up on launch and then make it go all the way to the asteroid. I'm not even offended by the fact that they landed on the asteroid and got back. I'm not offended about that. But the fact that they decided to put nukes onto a spaceship with humans, which, fun fact, one of the ways we can actually deter asteroids is definitely not by exploding them. Yes, we can use nukes, but not to explode, but to change their trajectory. So it is a real thing, a space management system in which we will deflect an asteroid from the collision course with Earth, but we will never explode it. And what they did? Bam! Into a shower of all these gigantic pieces that can hurt so many cities at the same time. I mean, that's fantastic. That's so bad that I love it.
Okay. The time is up. The fight was pretty good, but it could be more brutal. Sorry, guys. The blood wasn't spilled, but maybe next time.
This is the problem when you get two empiricists to try and duke it out. I mean, empiricists, by definition, we find the common ground. We work things out.
Yeah, but
we're not politically motivated.
We talked a little about killing, half of the humanity, and female half, right? So that was good enough for me. And your optimism, of course, Peter, as always.
Yeah, I wanted to note that was that really made my day. I was for a moment I was speechless there.
Yeah, not only you. Okay, so thank you very much, and thank you, thank you. I want to thank you, our beautiful, charming audience, beautiful, charming, savage scientist, and incredibly, absolutely quite famous writer. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I had a blast.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I had a great time.
Scritch your dog for me.
Yeah, kiss her, right? Kiss her. Kiss her.
I will.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.